Hello, dear Sonia Kacem. You are the 14th winner of the Zurich Art Prize. 14 years ago, the Museum Haus Konstruktiv and the Zurich Insurance Group have developed this prize. And the idea is that we award each year an artist who has gained a certain visibility in the international art world and whose work has a connection also to the constructivist, concrete or conceptual heritage, what the Museum Haus Konstruktiv is dealing thematically. I was very happy when my jury and I were completely in a unique vote voted for you as the winner of this year's Zurich Art Prize, and I'm extremely happy to see the result of what you have been done. I think the first thing we need to say when we talk about your work is that, first of all, you have been working with the abstract for many, many years. So the theme of abstraction, the non-figurative, dealing with forms, shapes, structures, and the cultural background of what abstraction means, under which context, is something which is there for a long time in your work.
Yes, it's true, indeed. Like since the beginning, I started with big installation sculpture, quite large scale. And I remained in an abstract register, like developing abstract shape in the space. And yeah, what I can say, at the beginning it was really like relating like to what I would call like fundaments of sculptures. So I would develop a sculpture around sort of essential like point of view of sculpture, like meaning when you turn around an object, like this is basic of sculpture, you have to move around to get the full picture. It's a bit different than painting. Then it was involving like a composition, like what I would call formal aspect that include exactly what you said, like texture, colors, materiality, composition in a space. I would also include there the pictorial aspect, which is quite an important part also in my work. And then there is how the object, or let's say the environment, because my installation have this sort of scenographic quality. So it means that you are walking in an environment as an audience. So it drag with it like the notion of fiction. So those two ideas, abstraction and fiction, comes really close next to it in the installation sculpture that I'm developing since, 2006, I guess.
2006. And I think for this exhibition at Haus Konstruktiv, there was a residency you had, particularly interesting also, so it's shaping the background also of this exhibition. You had a residency in Cairo. Yeah. And I was obviously interested in what you have already explained, what you researched there. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an insight of what was it, what you found there, and what was also the difference between this non-Western and the Western point of view.
Yeah, so it comes through my personal background. So I can say that like I'm a hybrid, like my mom is Swiss, my father is Tunisian. So yeah, I have, of course, two different point of view, two perspectives that also develop an imaginary that I was actually interested like to find more, to phrase a bit more properly. Like, so I was looking for, since a while, like to go to an Arabic country. First it was like Tunisia, but it was not as developed for residency program. So I got the chance to go to Cairo, which is a totally different context. Like, I mean, it's still like, of course, Muslim education mainly, but yeah, it has a total different history, different the climate, like the geography, all the cultural heritage is different, and it's such a huge city, like 20 million inhabitants. So I would go there with the idea like to really simple, like I would confront actually this idea, like this stereotyped idea that we have about Islamic art that is mainly in Europe. I would say that it's non-figurative. In this non-figurative put in parallel to abstract art, like as we hear it in the contemporary art vocabulary. But when I arrived there, it was a bit more complicated than that. So I was facing my own Western gaze, even being a hybrid. So it was really interesting, like to deconstruct and to find ways, actually, or an area where I could actually develop forms with actually not avoiding, but let's say took it from another perspective. And this is how I started to focus on colors. But colors on really specific area in the city. It was like on the balcony area of private apartments where the wall would be colored in different colors. And what was interesting for me is how it's like a private person who takes his personal taste outdoor to the facade. So yeah, this was how I focused on that topic.
You have told me that you were sort of taking as a kind of visual memory. You took some photographs and some short films, and you made some aquarelles in a notebook to sort of assemble your impressions from Cairo. And then when you got back home, we all faced this situation of pandemic, which forced us all to stay at home quite a bit and work, and in your case also work from a domestic environment. And so you were telling me that for this exhibition, this sketchbook became actually quite important. So maybe we can talk about what you actually did.
Yes, so I started during this residency to do those color books, quite large color books, that were actually like just repeating a same gesture with different kind of brushes and watercolor like colors. And this is something that is new, like, and I was also quite happy to work on a scale of a desk, that this was really convenient, and these books have no finality at the end. It's really about colors, shapes, gesture, and pattern, ornament. So this was in 2019. So when the pandemic was announced, I was in Amsterdam. Everything was pending in the art world. So I started I continued those books from home, and yeah, I would continue with the different palettes of watercolors. I would also experiment with different brands and adding different layers. And what you see here actually on the facades, it's an extract of my color book. I mean, those patterns are maybe, I don't know, 3 centimeters high. Yeah. And it's, so we made it bigger, it's almost like a 1 meter by 1 meter that was repeated, printed on this semi-transparent fabric. Those brushes, traces become sort of patterns. So this becomes a wallpaper almost.
You actually see the movement of the gesture, and it's like the usage of the brushstroke in a repetitious way. Still, it has this notion of working with yourself in a very concentrated way, but then you made it bigger. I always think it's an amazing thing when small things and intimate things are made to a new dimension and brought to a new area and a new environment. This is what also happens here. You have been referring already to wallpaper. So that's one aspect what many people think of when they see it. They have immediately this idea of a wallpaper, but then also immediately there is this idea of an architectural form, of an architectural shape. So you have sort of combined the internal and the external area. So with the wallpaper belonging to a domestic field and the architectural facade belonging to a public field.
Yeah, it was a bit of it. I mean, this work has it's an interesting hybrid, like, because it's at the same time like it's a facade, it's a canvas, it's a wallpaper, it's like painting. Because this room is quite huge, and because how I'm used to work is usually like a response to the architect object as well. So I decided to work like to develop those two facades, also to give a different experience of the room, and yeah, to bring the outside inside, because a facade is usually what you see outside on the streets, like the facade of a building, and it was about to bring them inside. This is also why the title Facade Superflu. The superflu, it's superfluous, it's something that is not necessary or a bit too much. I decided to add that to those ones because we are inside and there is no necessity to have facades inside, let's say.
When you talk about the Superflu, which also is the title of the exhibition, it's something which is also often used when people talk about the ornament, or in art history there were lots of discussions about the ornaments being not necessary, for it not having a purpose, not having a function. So why is it there? So there have been like discussions, like one of the most famous architects from modernity, Adolf Loos, was even stating that ornament is a crime. So when we have this discussion about ornament or pattern, it's very often going in this direction of it is something which is superflu, maybe not necessary. So this, I'm sure, played a role when you chose the title for the show.
Yeah, because this show is really about ornament, like Actually, the red thread between this room and the upper room it's my color books, where I developed those shapes, pattern, ornaments, that became really sort of essential during the pandemic time, where I was seeking for visual pleasure or comfort in my domestic place.
We were even talking about if culture is necessary and essential.
Yeah, exactly. So everything was closing down. The only thing available was, grocery and grocery shops. And so it's interesting what was happening in the private space and the public space. The idea of essential and superfluous.
Then we have in the space something which is for the space and for the exhibition quite essential, which are the sculptures made of cardboard and also big size, more than human size. And they always remind me, and there's also, I think you meant it like this, they also remind on the brush stroke, on gestures done by the hand. So again, forming this really nice link between the pattern on the tapestry, well, I call it already tapestry now, on the textile, and making a nice reference to both of it, sculpture, pattern, architecture, space. And we as a spectator, we walk in between, and you have mentioned the body as an important element for your work, and I think this is something which really feels quite bodily. Because we immediately sort of interact with the sculptures, and what you said at the beginning, the sculpture makes you turn around. This is also what they really drive us to do. We have this urge to go around and see the different angles of the space and installation.
Yeah, so those are also shapes that come from my color books. And I was interested like to make large sculpture made of cardboard. Like also cardboard, I found it interesting because you rarely see it in those dimensions. Yeah. And I'm not always comfortable with making really big object that sort of dominates the audience. So for me, it was an interesting, like, compromise, like to have this material that is so familiar that you have in your daily domestic household. When you buy, I don't know, apples, it's like wrapped in cardboard, or when you order stuff online, you have it with cardboard. Like it was also, it's all over the place. So I found this is already, it's quite important, the material. And then, like, it also gave this, again, this stage scenery aspect that I found quite interesting. You understand that it's something light that can move, and they appear also as a little character. They have this sort of comics, cartoonesque personality. Yeah. Last summer, I was also discussing with the cartoonists from Cairo, Shenawi, and we would do this sort of virtuous stroll through Cairo, discuss about what happened there, what sort of color struck us. And in his drawing, there is also a lot of patterns or ornaments that are appearing. So we were sharing this material, him from the 2D dimension, cartoon, and an arm from the sculpture, contemporary art. So yeah, they have this character that it makes them a bit more approachable, I hope.
Yeah, I think they are very approachable, and maybe at this stage we should also go up to the other space. Yeah. So we have been talking in connection with the sculpture, we have been talking about gestures and shapes you have taken out of your color book. Mm-hmm. And when we come up on the first floor and we see this wall installation, it very much reminds me also on gestures, but in a different way. They have more this calligraphic feel to it.
Actually, it started when I was in residency in Amsterdam at the Rijksacademie. Like, they have this wood workshop where other artists works, and there was like this big bin full of leftovers, and there was one with this really strange shapes. So there were a few of them that I took to the studio, and I sort of reworked a bit on it. I don't know exactly why I was attracted to it, but I took them, and I decided like just to give them a sort of thickness and all the same. And then I had this sort of start of a few signs, letters. And how I would develop them, like I would sort of copy them on like standard like plywood planks. So I would copy or sort of mix few of them together. And then I would cut them with the jigsaw, and then they would also produce new leftovers with new like interesting shape. So this is like a sort of system, let's say, that is sort of ongoing and never ending, if you want. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, what I found it interesting with this work, which is a bit so different from what you see around, it also echoed actually this the book, the gesture, like with a brush to repeat, and in that sense, like it maybe echoes like the practice of calligraphy that I'm starting to get interested in.
But an interesting moment here is also the idea of something found, which is the moment when something you have an idea to develop it further. And I think also with this work over here, the ensemble of 9, we have pictorial, like it's almost like paintings that the fabric you have used here are also fabric which have been used before, like for sunshades and these kind of materials. You have also kind of found them and put it into a new usage.
Yeah, it started exactly with found on the streets, like a used one that has like all the patina of time, you know, with some algae, dirt, whatever. And what I liked in this material is the stripe, the colors, like the sort of memory that can be brought by, because for me it reminds me like the seaside or like a sort of unproductive time, let's say, or even though like sunblinds, I don't know, I use always this example, a balcony with having like the coffee and dessert with your grandma, or I don't know, like something that is usually quite warm and joyful. I was interested in folds as a theme or a subject of study classic art history. I would put resin on them and really fix the folds. So I have a big installation made of different folds that are stiff. It's called like monstering. And then I continued to work with those because of the colors also. And I started, and those works are made of leftovers. I would go through the sunblind companies and ask for leftovers, and they had maybe like a sewing workshop in the back with the fabric, so I could have a few of them. So it's really a mix of this sort of leftovers, sort of recycling idea behind the material I used. And at some point I also bought new ones because I wanted specific colors.
Yeah. I think they are really amazing because they have this painterly quality. They come, but they come into the space, so they have also this object moment to it. And then when we take a closer look at your latest work, which you have been also doing for the show, we have these wall objects, which also they come as an ensemble, so very much they also resemble in a way painting, but they have something very interesting. They have an internal life to them, which is visible on the outside by pure pressure. This gives a very interesting moment of shapes coming through it, and color again, and a very interesting moment also of what it all resembles. It somehow made us think, when we talked about, we spoke of jewelry, we spoke also of upholstering, of furniture. I think this is also, which makes a really nice connection to the work we see downstairs, but it's on a more domestic scale. What I really like is the kind of internal life you sort of make visible, you give a hinge to it.
It's interesting because I started those, it was in June 20, so during the pandemic, like the confinement. And they were supposed to be prototypes for larger work. So because I wanted to have a plateau fixed object, like with the plateau, how do you say, like a plate of wood, and with different objects composed on the plate of wood, and the fabric stretched around, like, and the shapes, like I wanted them to be something else than just like simple geometrical common, like circles or square or rectangles. So I again used my color book to define the shapes behind. I relate them a bit more to furniture design somehow, because probably they have this scale and this sort of finish. So there is like locksmiths involved, like carpentry, upholstery. The front is as well done as the back. So yeah, so they are really fine detailed objects, but also made with really common material. And I think this is running a bit through the show. It's that there are like, it has like a character of preciosité.
Yeah, of precious objects.
Precious object, jewelry, yeah. But it's basically the material used are part of the collection. Like my fabric, for example, is like my little collection. I gather like fabric here and there, and then use it, and it's more about the labor. Like I'm more interested about the labor and the level of details like you can reach. Like everything is like or tailored or handmade. So each rings also on those one fits exactly each frame. So it's quite precise and time-demanding work.
Well, I think this is really a really great overview of your work so far. Yeah. Thank you very, very much for giving us all these insights, and all the best and good luck to the show. Thank you.
Thank you.